Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Common Ground webinar. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. My name is Erin Tocchini, Chief of Staff and Director of Events at the Music Business Association. During this webinar, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Make sure you change those settings to everyone so all attendees can see your messages. Also, if you have questions for the presenter, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please be sure to submit all questions through that form, and our presenter will get to them by the end of the session. Planning for Music Biz 2024 is well underway. Registration, hotel rooms, call for presentations, and sponsorships are all now open and available. You can find out more information at musicbiz2024.com. We also have our Trust and Safety in Music Symposium taking place on January 9th at the Rosenthal Pavilion at NYU. Please check musicbiz.org for registration. Also, we have a three-part event series that is wrapping up with our final event, Evolution, Empowerment, and Earnings, Making Sense of the Modern Music Business, hosted by the MLC on November 28th. More info for that can also be found at musicbiz.org. Without further ado, please welcome John Rasso from Audium. The stage is all yours, John.
Hello, thank you. Pleasure to be here today. I hope everyone finds the topic interesting. Quite a mix of experiences of the people who've signed up. So some of this you will be quite familiar with. Hopefully it's organized in a way that makes the pieces fit. But hopefully you learned something, everyone learned something new today, or at least understands the process in which we go about handling proactive royalty collections. So let me pull up my slides here. And okay, I think we're in good shape. Real briefly, my name's John Rasso. I have been in the publishing orbit for probably about 20 plus years. And prior to that, I always like to say I've had every single job in the record industry, from booking bands to working at record labels, a product manager, did publicity, worked for a digital.com before there was broadband and down pre iPod, etc. Worked at Bearing Point KPMG Consulting as part of a project for ASCAP and the Harry Fox Agency, and then spent many years at the Harry Fox Agency, and now I'm currently running Audium. So let me move here. My screen's not moving. There we go. Okay, so just wanted to give you a quick overview of the SESAC Music Services division, of which Audium is part of. This is sort of a recently organized structure. So I just thought I wanted to take this opportunity to sort of explain to everybody where Audium fits in here. So the SESAC Music Group is the parent organization that owns all of these organizations, and we all act independently as sister organizations. And within the music group, separate, and this is separate from the SESAC Performing Rights division, is what we call the Music Services division. This includes Audium, which is the company I run, which focuses on YouTube administration, digital collections for sort of non-compulsory notice, compulsory service licensing, as well as streaming and other mechanical licenses. I'll go into that a little deeper on the next slide. There's also Audio Salad, which is a digital distributor that distributes sound recordings to streaming services globally. There's the Harry Fox Agency, which is the oldest organization here, which focuses on physical and download licensing for the United States. Our international group is Mint. So there's CSAC Digital, which is the licensing entity, and Mint is the administrative entity, which is a joint venture between CSAC and Suiza, and that handles ex-North America territories for digital collections. There's Music Services, which is a Nashville-based organization which does sort of full service back office support for labels and for music publishers. They administer royalties for writers. They issue licenses for music publishers, and that's a whole suite of services unto itself, very supporting the back offices of independent labels and publishers. Rumblefish is the business development end for music publishers. You're probably most familiar with that if anybody's received solicitations for various companies that fall outside of mechanical reproductions via your relationship with the Harry Fox agency. And that really provides services for businesses that need to obtain music licenses. Songfile is really part of Harry Fox and Rumblefish's services for individuals, garage bands, small institutions to obtain mechanical right licenses through a portal and prepaid for it. And I think that covers everybody here. So once again, Audium is the division I work for, or the company I work for and run. And while we interact with all of these companies and provide each other services, we are the primary point for digital administration for music publishers. So with that, moving into rights and the royalty sources that we're talking about for these proactive collections. We break them down into three general groups. Mechanical rights, which is the audio only reproduction in the United States, interactive streaming, the majority of which is through the MLC blanket license, even though there are still some direct licenses that happen. Physical product, which a lot of people use HFA for or obtain licenses direct, and downloads, just another configuration of the same use. A lot of times people break out interactive streaming from physical and downloads, but it is exactly the same, right? The same copyright definition or licensing definition. So these are organized a little more pragmatically rather than legally, legal definitions, because we're mostly here in the position of collections and making sure royalties are properly attributed and distributed to the correct parties that we represent. So YouTube Content ID is really divided into in the works we do is the publishing, the underlying composition, and the sound recording, as opposed to the video right. And then third is this sort of a catch-all audio-visual, non-mechanical, which is once again audio-only uses that has been driven by the evolution of technology. We now have all these various UGC video sources, TikTok and Meta with Instagram and Facebook. The digital jukeboxes are out there. AMI TouchTunes being examples. There's digital karaoke now. So lyrics and tablature, as well as just all these various other fitness apps, background services, lyrics, and various other uses that don't work under the compulsory notice, the compulsory licensing that allows anyone to do a cover song. But once you start integrating any sort of visual component, it requires an agreement And so part of the reason for doing this presentation is the fact that we used to live in a world where it was a one-for-one license, right? You would match things up, and now we've through general agreements and opt-ins that we've moved, and the MLC itself, that we've moved into more of a blanket license kind of world. So as a result, you need to sort of follow up that you're properly being accounted to, rather than the fact you had gotten a notice where you knew before the use happened that a license was put in place. So let me click through here. So the big thing is in order to properly do that, it is data. That's you have to properly register the publishing works you represent. For anybody on this call that uses CWR puts together as a global standard, and which a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here are required and necessary. But the majority of the independent publishers we work with, and even some of the more significant size publishers, do not use the CWR format to deliver. And historically, mechanical rights collection, you just really needed a title, the writer names, what splits, and by default, frequently it was the U.S., but now as the world has become more, or rights licensing has become more global, territory is much more common and used. But with that, as we now want to make sure our rights are properly assigned, and that is really a use of a sound recording or some other performance of that is captured in a stream of one of your compositions. Additional, more enhanced data is incredibly, while not required, goes a long way. And at Audium, we spend a lot of time enhancing that data and working it. So essentially, the process is we try to make life as easy and as possible with all the different services that are using the music, so that reporting can come to us in a faster and a more accurate way. Once again, the MLC has been a real sea change over the last couple of years, in that previously every single DSP, you would have to find the source that was administrating. There was multiple, some of them directly, some are hiring various services to perform that works, and you needed to maintain your repertoire and your data in each one of those. So streaming has been consolidated into a much more centralized practice. But even then, it's very important, as the MLC uses the expression "play your part," to be engaged in performing those tasks. So and as a result, they've also brought up the standards of how people report recording. So as I go through here, I'll dig a little deeper here. So right, so a lot of times we have issues with people deliver a title and they deliver the writer. They either represent themselves, and they don't give us co-writers. So as a result, or even for that matter, I've seen a situation where they say, well, yes, I am collecting 100% of my share, and give us the share as 100%, even though they have a co-writer that wrote half the song, and it's essentially been agreed to that it is a 50-50 split, and they don't give us the other person's writer name. So that's a common problem we generally see. So all title, the title, and all your writer names, very, very important. Also, any alternative titles. A submitter work number is the individual company. So for example, if I control, as a music publisher, I can hold 100 songs, and I have song number 32, and in my database, it's song number 32. So if I'm able to attach that it is, John Rasso's music number 32, that makes it much easier for us to account back, and that you understand that when we are talking about this title, because titles are very common, that we are passing back to you that information as well. So and there's most of the databases out there that accept your works have a place to store that submitter work number. So It's another means of identification so that we're all talking about the same work. On a global level, there's the ISWC, which is which is a code. Generally, people receive that from their performing rights organization. That number is assigned, and once again, that it is outside the United States. It's been a much more common use, and it's becoming much more commonly populated here in the United States. So as we see that actually is once again is the unique ID that identifies the composition. So important to get those. The HFA song code has been around for I think the database established in the early 1970s. So that song code has been around and is actually used by YouTube as well. And it is also the same ID that is called the MLC song code as well. So that is an incredibly in the United States, incredibly important piece of ID that is commonly used throughout. So if you know your HFA song code, your MLC song code, try to use that in your data wherever possible. Your writer IPI is also something that you would get from your performing rights organization. It is the unique identifier that identifies the writer. There is an IPI base number, but most commonly there's what's called the name number that identifies the writer. A writer could have multiple name numbers. I'm not the expert on this. Your performing rights organization, so ASCAP, PMI, or CSAC, we'll be able to provide you with more information about the details of this. But ultimately, you could have if you are a writer and you perform under various names, you could have multiple name numbers. So you want the IPI name number that's associated with the entity that you're writing as, or that you're representing that writer is delivered with your composition. Once again, it's another means that there's a lot of songs called Sunshine. So writer makes it unique, and writer names could be first initial last name, or just last name, or a whole name with middle name, right? So there's an inconsistency there. So you want the IPI name number helps make that we know which John Smith we're talking about, or if it's Jay Smith, or it's Joe Smith, or etc. But similar scenario with publisher IPI. Your catalog will also have a unique IPI number assigned through your PRO. Once again, there are very close names. There are people that send their name out in one way, but the IPI number is another way of providing a unique piece of information of identification. So all of these we're looking for is ways to identify that we're all talking about the same composition. Now, the represented writer links is if there's multiple writers on a song and there's multiple publishers on the song. It's incredibly helpful to understand which publisher. And this will come up again when we get to conflicts. That shows which writer are you representing. That's really what I mean by represented writer links here. So, for example, there's 3 writers on a song. There's 3 publishers on the song. There's a conflict over 2 parties, and we find out that there's 2 parties that believe they represent this one writer, and that's where so now we know, at least we isolate where the conflict is, and we find out how to resolve that issue. So your represented writer link is when you that the parties that are representing you or yourself are always clearly stating what writer it is you're representing. And then, as I referred to with the writer IPI number, legal and professional writer names, like you should be aware of that. So frequently when you go to register songs in a database, you should check, obviously, if the song is already registered. Your co-writer may have already registered the song, and what you want to do is not create a duplicate entity. You want to add your share to the existing composition that's registered in that database. That will go a long way to getting the royalties to flow properly. When I'm referring here about legal and professional, my typo, professional writer names here is the fact that my name is John Rasso, but I might write under, DJ John or something like that. And so the people who professionally represent me know what my legal name is, and properly register it, but my co-writer may just put my co-writing credit as DJ John, and as a result, we end up having two titles that match, one writer match, the other writer name doesn't match because one is under John Rasso and the other one, and it's that will, most systems will default that to a duplicate song. Oh, there's a enough difference here that it creates a separate composition, and as a result, that creates a problem because what sound recording gets matched to which composition. So, and once again, we'll go a little farther there. So I'm seeing one of the questions just sort of popped up here was how to globally update your IPI information, and unfortunately there is not. Like where there's multiple databases, you need to do multiple updates. Currently, even in the US, most of the systems you can update it at the song level, right? So unfortunately, you can't. There's not a lot of interfaces externally where you can do anything but update an IPI song by song. However, almost all of those services you could probably reach out and say, how can I do a global update throughout your system for my IPI number? I know those are several things that I'll be working on or being worked on, but that sort of refers to some of the things that people assume that to do that work is a great deal of work, and as a result, that's why there are companies that like Audium that spend so much time really dealing with song registration, completion, enhancement of data, and then the conflicts those result from. So a lot of people think, oh, I register my works and the money starts flowing, and that's essentially the proactive part that I'm trying to get through here of the ongoing value and and the necessity of having an administrative team in place to do this work. The accessibility of getting your music distributed has been very simple, and you can truly be a one-person machine to be a publisher, a label, a writer, a performer, a record label. However, the work and the knowledge to do those things doesn't go away. And so as the industry evolves, we I think there becomes a nice sort of system where knowledge becomes more spread out, and the example I always use is you could have a really fancy car, but you have to know how to drive it, and you have to know the rules, and you have to, otherwise it's just a big piece of machinery that doesn't do much. One of the side things here, that's just sort of covers everything that you want. I'm registering a song as much as possible, right? But there's always then exceptions to this. For example, there are public domain works. Now, public domain works, you flag it as a public domain work, but you can claim a copyright of your particular arrangement, and to do that, you need to you need to put your writer name as though as a writer name in the arrangement so that you can make it unique. And in most cases, you also need to deliver the artist name, right? You want to know who's performing it, anything to help to identify it, because so you shouldn't just register Amazing Grace public domain. Like, you can't do that. That will be rejected. Your arrangement of it will not be captured. So you want to make sure you identify in the writer field, you put in an arranger. You don't just, put Beethoven or whoever in there. So make sure you include the arranger's name. Medleys. The MLC just actually published their policy on this too. Medleys, in particular in the streaming world, are required to register it as a unique composition. So once a medley is approved for use through through the people, the publishers and the people making the recording, and the splits, let's assume it's 3 songs and everyone gets 33%. There now needs to be a new composition entity registered in the databases that have the 3 songs, and I'll get to this in a second, but it should reflect the recording, like how the recording title. So it's not my 3 songs about blah blah blah. It literally should be exactly how it is presented. It's the, you know, uh, the American trilogy, or it's a medley of blah blah blah. That it should reflect that. It shouldn't be just the 3 titles pushed together, unless that's the way it's being done. And then you would go in and register your splits just like anything else. So if you control 100% of one of the songs, let's assume you would then put in title, all the writers, and your percentage, your 33% percentage of that. And then lastly, and the exception that's going around is there's now termination rights. That is sort of in a legal limbo right now, as it's being determined how that's going to be administered in a streaming world. But that's where rights have terminated with the original publisher, and a new now active derivative version of that work, where essentially everything is the same except for the splits would change, with a reversion to the writer, or whatever the new splits that are determined after that point need to be registered. So those are exceptions. They're not common, but just something to be aware of. Next year. So now, in order to go in and register things, you need to provide documentation or letters of direction, commonly called LODs. And so this is all information that helps prevent, that shows authority, of that you control these works, and as well as to help disputes down the line. So that's the agreement that you have with your writer. Now, they should be redacted, or you have a specific letter of direction that you had your client sign. So you have that on file, and with file to show authority that you can register and claim these works. And once again, each one of the services that we've talked about have different means and different levels of documentation. So I am talking pretty general here, but these are all things that that you need to have prepared and be able to show, so that none of this catches you by surprise. So your effective dates, obviously very important. When did you start representing this? Is it retro? Some writer agreements are reactive to it's all works prior, or is it just for a particular period? So that's important. There's always this post-term, or I shouldn't say always, but frequently a post-term collection period, which then there becomes a clear identification of revenues that continue to flow to the previous representative or publisher for a period after the switch over. Some of those are challenged to administer, and in which cases those are sometimes actually settled and resolved between the 2 parties. And other times the services have means in which to redirect royalties at a certain time. Some of this is done through a snapshot of ownership for a period, and then the distribution happens reflecting that period at a future date, and then it switches over. A great capturing of this process is the MLC catalog transfer form. If a catalog was previously administered by something, the MLC will actually will ask you to fill out one of these forms, and that covers actually covers everything that I'm pointing to above here. So that if some of this is going too fast or difficult, it's a great form to look at to see the type of information that you need to provide when you have taken over a new catalog. So far, and then one of the other challenges with registration happening, and this is not a question that's frequently asked, but is discovered after a problem happens, is there's split catalogs. And what I mean by that, and it seems, in my experience, seems to be a fairly unique American situation, but there's a catalog that maintains the same name, but prior to X period, or for a certain group of works, is administered by one party, and then going forward, or a specific group of works is administered by another party. However, it's still called, My Songs. So my songs, it's like you're not able to. It makes it difficult for the reporting services, the usage companies, to then go, well, who represents my songs? And it really becomes a very specific schedule of songs. So that's just one of those things that need to be clear if you are in a situation like that um, when you're registering those songs, so that going forward, that, and I find that, once again, I find that a little more of a challenging when information is shared overseas. And so we were talking about IPI numbers. Oh, we represent this writer and this catalog, but that there then needs to be a division of well, that catalog sort of when and what. But so now the works are registered, right? We say we've got a clean scenario of works being registered here. And the key piece here is getting the sound recordings that have been released by record companies or even yourself that are now out in the world generating royalties associated with your compositions. Now, for a long time, it has been just simply straightforward. Oh, provide ISRCs. ISRCs have sort of proved a bit troubling in that ISRCs are not really managed in a way and not in the same scrutiny. And I guess it's the International Song Recording Code, or I probably got that wrong, but it's a unique identifier that is not a record company is assigned a group of numbers, and then they build out an identifier, and they build out what is their own ISRC following the restrictions of it. However, there is no policing of this. I've seen one album have every single song have the same ISRC, which was probably a result of someone dragging something down on an Excel spreadsheet incorrectly, and instead of it updating. So as a result of this has created challenges of ISRC matching. And for example, even when we were talking about medleys, right? Historically, a medley would be able to be, oh, I'm going to get a license for these 4 songs. But now in the matching exercises that happen to identify usage, that medley ISRC should be matching to a medley composition. So sorry, I feel like I'm moving a little fast on the ISRC part with what the challenges are. So let me go back of how best to do this now. So the way matching takes place in most cases is there is a exact title and artist match, right? So these are the things when you're delivering your compositions, right? It's now in the database. Registered properly as a composition. You now want to add and update regularly known artist names to associate with that composition. So once again, making it easy to know that when it's the artist, and once again, the challenge here is different services might have artist names done in a different way, and there are processes and going on now to sort of help identify, similar to the way there is an IPI number for writers and an IPI number for catalogs and an ISRC for a sound recording, and an ISW. There's been talk about certain identifiers in the book industry. There's ISNIs. So having an artist starting to use a more unique identifier. So is it Paul McCartney? Is it McCartney Paul? Is it Paul McCartney and Wings? Is it Wings? Like all of the variations that you see. Is it artist featuring? So once again, these are all things you want to give as much information as possible so that there is clearly understood what sound recordings are of what compositions of, once again, that song Sunshine, which one is it? Because frequently there is no writer information of the composition associated with the sound recording metadata that is being delivered in order to help that match. Release date is also important, and usually year is enough. And once again, not required, but so now there's an incident one time where I saw there was a song. I believe it was a contemporary artist. Didn't exist for the 90s or the aughts. Yet I saw a cover, it matched to a cover of a song recorded by Jimi Hendrix. And so I knew it wasn't possible, even though the titles matched. But the reality is if you knew the right, if you know the composition was created was registered for the first time in 2005 and the recording was made in 1968, there's a very good chance that they couldn't possibly be. And so it would be something that at least would flag it, if not prevent a match from happening. So once again, very helpful. UPC and label I put on there because that's also helpful as clues. I'm not aware of matching exercises. They're generally used for in the publishing world, but once again, there is, if that information is available, it's always helpful to provide if you can. Now you've had the works registered, your compositions are registered, you've given all the sound recording information you possibly can. This is now put into the various systems that use these, but all the databases globally and the United States, and as a result, you find out we don't all agree. Or information gets old. So the causes of these conflicts are sometimes like legitimate legal conflict of who controls it, right? That happens on a regular basis. Disagreements on terms, on territories, etc. If the world was just that becomes I wish that was more the frequency, because that is like a legit conflict. Most of the ones we see are actually a result of just poor data. So overclaims. Someone, I've seen issues where it's 33.4 and everyone claims 33.4 and it puts it in 100%. But there is a lot of systems that will accept that much of a variance and know that it's how to divide it as 100% pi. But it's the more significant overclaims. We like on a fairly common overclaim we see is my company represents this catalog and we represent it at 50%. But what ends up happening is the catalog name goes in at 50% and the administrator name goes at 50%. And rather than those being perceived as a single 50% claim, it looks as two separate 100% claims. Once again, putting it into overclaims. And various systems handle those differently. Some of them just lock it up, and other times it is done as a first in claim. So if, in which case that scenario I was talking about where the overclaim is 100% of what was supposed to be a 50% claim, that party will sit 100% on that song. The other party of the 50% will come in and be rejected. So you always have to be on top of your rejections, right? You can't let them stew too long, because in some cases it means the incorrect party will continue to be paid until like that is addressed and you flag it as no, this is incorrect and it needs to be addressed before incorrect royalties get distributed. Territory, very common. Without clarity in the territories, you end up running into scenarios where it's only the U.S. and its territories, or even some cases that there's an argument over whether that Guam is part of the United States or not, when people claim just the lower 48, and so sometimes there's where people default to the world, and we run into conflicts in specific territories. That split catalog scenario I was talking about there, where you end up, it turns out like, oh no, songs when he was a writer as part of this musical group are the songs in that catalog we represent, whereas the solo recordings or the solo compositions are with us. So those are usually resolved fairly quickly with a simple share of schedules. The double administered scenario happens quite a bit too, where there is someone signs a new agreement, but doesn't bother to notify the previous administer, and there's an auto renewal that happens if they don't notify 30 days, 90 days before the end of the term, and as a result, come it's January 1, 2024, you have two administrators, and that then has to be resolved about, which is very frustrating because it's not an error on the part of the administrators, but an error on someone who's like, well, if I sign up for everything, then I'll make sure I'll get my royalties. There is also the reversals, easy for me to say, of how rights have returned, through the terminations or the end of an agreement. And once again, notifying the parties that these changes have taken place, rather than wait for it to hold up your royalties. If you're up out ahead of it, you're able to keep the royalties flowing without any disruption. And then what I call is post-term arguments is there's frequently a scenario where monies flow for a period in which the other party administered, and there is not clarity of, well, you didn't collect the money during your time as administrator, and as a result, those monies are now ours. But generally, they are specifically identified as, a 6-month term. If that money, if it arrives at the administrator, the current administrator, how those are handled, or whether those things. But I've seen those go on for a little too long. So those are the problems those cause. So now the way these things get resolved are, or even for that matter, how lack of resolution forces them into these stalemate resolution scenarios are as follows. And this is sort of, a lot of this is Audium's policy of how to deal with and how we go through the process of conflict resolution. Particularly so, we refer to, because we now live in a world where there is a public database of record of publishing claims in the MLC database. We always try to refer back to, if we're in conflict of what the splits are, we go, well, this is what has been publicly available at the MLC. Now, there's a lag. It's usually, not too long of a window, or that this is where this actually helps accelerate that process to get everyone on the same page. But we certainly find, particularly when an administrator is more distant from the actual publishing house and aren't aware of changes in a timely fashion, will put things in conflict while all the other databases are getting updated. So we generally start with, let's agree that the MLC is currently the database of record, and go from there. We then go through a process of email confirmations where we'll put all the parties on a single email thread and reach out to them going, look, we're claiming 12% on behalf of this writer. Can everyone else raise their hand and say what they claim? And then generally we'll come to a consensus, or at least once again, we will narrow down to where the exact problem is and that needs to be addressed. We do that documentation swap we're talking about when we can't sort of agree by email. The next thing is like, okay, well, let me prove that what I'm saying and why I'm saying that. And we go to this documentation. Unfortunately, sometimes that has to escalate to a legal precedent to interpret those documents, and parties bring, and that becomes costly, and that's really a last resort, and thankfully is generally a rare scenario to get that resolved. So when things don't get to that level, there are other ways in which like time essentially solves the problem. And not always, and we don't want to go there, right? We ultimately want to get it accurate, the claims flowing, no delay in royalties. However, when you live in a world where there are things that go unclaimed or unmarked or just unidentified, they, after a period of time, and as you see on the right of this slide, there's different procedures. The MLC and YouTube, and in each one of the direct deals, there's frequently NMPA settlements when there's that follow some of these rules. So there is no one set rules, and even now the MLC has been dictated how the policies go through the Music Modernization Act and the establishment of the MLC. That is still a bit of a work in progress, and then will become the start of a regular cadence moving forward. But then companies like YouTube have strict policies in place where they have what they call the annual accrued royalties program, where generally it's about, it goes back about a year and a half to settle unmatched royalties, and they get divided out by market share. So once again, a market share is established by the successful claims you've made. So your market share becomes only a significant. If you've never claimed anything, your market share is going to be zero. So there is it helps generate motivation to identify as many of your actual royalties as possible to establish a market share, because I don't imagine a world where everything will ever be identified. There's the gates to distributing music and putting it out in the marketplace has become so low that like all of that just won't be identified. And in fact, in some cases, there are things out there that are generating royalties that may not be properly being identified, or that shouldn't be, public domain, spoken word, the various kind of things that are currently not generating that kind of revenue, and they end up in a pool that needs to be divided in some manner. So developing that market share is really important. And also, I believe one of the things that is valuable about hiring an administrator like Audium, we have a market share, so there will be monies that in turn will then be divided up into a sub market share of against our clients. So that unidentified money goes to proper parties. So moving and in international, which I know quite less about, is each DSP has various means of dealing with those scenarios too. Some it's sort of a hodgepodge of everything I mentioned above, and each territory has a copyright society, which frequently ends up with a pool of money for unmatched in each territory, and in turn then is divided into their amongst their members, of which as US writers we wouldn't be members of. So once again, we want to be proactive and get as much claim and data out there so it flows, because that frequently doesn't end up back to the proper places. There's also audit processes. These are traditionally been audits of record companies to identify the Harry Fox Agency has been the leader in this group for forever. Most of the publishing industry, as an affiliate of the Harry Fox Agency, participates in these, and in a periodic basis. Audits take place to identify what is believed to be underreported royalties. There is that once again, not to drill towards too far down this, but there is audit rights also implicit in the MLC2, and you could go onto their website and read about the policies and how that will be done and what triggers those, et cetera. And then just one in here, is just an example of the NMPA, the National Music Publishers Association. Their members benefit from participation in things like the MOU, which is the Memorandum of Understanding, late fee settlement. That was one of the largest settlements in the history of the music business, in which all of this money that backed up at the record labels now has a regular distribution of unmatched royalties, and this is really the major labels that it impacts, but and all the publishers that have unmatched works, and it was great there. It also established a best practices meeting in which all of that information, the parties come together to try to prevent any of those royalties of being backed up, and how it prevents pending or unmatched royalties from building up in any great volume going forward. Okay, now that's a lot of information, and I know it didn't seem like I was addressing proactive collections, but all of that is proactive collections, right? There are more specific details in which all of that information I was asking about getting upfront is pursued then on an individual level. But frankly, it is really inefficient. We live in a world where it is now millions and millions of uses millions, millions and millions of sound recordings. I believe, the streaming services have well over 100 million different uses, different individual sound recordings up on the sites now. Not to mention, YouTube doesn't even necessarily need to have a sound recording embedded in it. It's, the karaoke, the live performance. There's all these different uses, and most of them are individually not valuable. It is about the cumulative and the mass identification of these. So the information that I just asked for, and it is important that you make available and register wherever you administer your own works, to make those systems do a job of identifying, even provide you with lists of potential matches to review and work through. Wow, I've been going for a long time now. I didn't realize. So I'm gonna. I've been seeing some questions over here, so I'm gonna take a moment to look at some of the questions that are coming here and see that if I've addressed them all. So thank you for your patience. That was actually very high level, but also covered a lot of ground. Okay, it looks like I've hit some of a lot of people were asking about different the bullet points. I believe hopefully I addressed all of those or whatever. I see I'm being asked about. So once again, I believe I've addressed it, and this isn't a presentation purely about what Audium does, but Audium is a service that provides everything I'm talking about. We work with you. We're a lot of companies talk about their technology, and we definitely have cutting edge technology. We pull all the information we can that's publicly available or available through relationships we have in order to do royalty collections, and we use it to enhance our the databases on your behalf. But at the end of the day, we have all of our staff have a deep background in music publishing and really understand how to organize that information and pursue, and also have a long history of relationships with so many of these different organizations, many of which have worked for our organizations throughout the years, from various major publishers, the establishment of these companies, the National Music Publishers Association. So these are all people that we know and can have conversations with. So I believe that's the greatest value we have, is we also are able to act as an aggregate of a bunch of independent creators, and it enables us to get more attention, because overall the value of our catalog, based on what I've seen, we are one of the top 20 in royalty value collection services in the United States, and that's up against even the major music publishers. So it puts us in a similar weight and league in order to have conversations, in order to properly represent your work. So that's enough of my sales pitch right now. I'll keep moving to make sure I'm covering everything. I see someone has a question here regarding ISRCs and one-to-one relationships in the chain, and so once again, that sort of goes back to the ISRC and a composition match generally is not enough, because a lot of times we've seen duplicate ISRCs. We see ISRCs attached to multiple compositions, and that's also a result of duplicate compositions being registered. So once again, half of the song is here, the other half of the song is there, and it's because the title's a little different. The parenthetical title is not made as an alternative title. There's just the one title. So, or it has professional name and stage name of somebody else, and a legal name of somebody. So and the ISRCs are attached depending on the service at different. So once again, it's really cumulative of getting the original record right. And so once again, artist name, ISRC, incredibly valuable to get that stuff cleaned up and accurate, and have every single one of these. Okay, someone asked here about updates between the different companies. I remember. So as many of you are aware, the Harry Fox database is the basis of what built the MLC database. So as a result, registrations of copyrights at the MLC are available in the HFA database and vice versa. Sound recording information that is added as a link through a relationship with Harry Foxworth, and as a result, Harry Fox publishers that need YouTube collection from that opt in for Harry Fox. Audium provides that service to Harry Fox. So as a result, all the work that Audium does to create matches for YouTube also end up back in Harry Fox and also the MLC. So there's a great synergy between all these different organizations, and that we're working towards building a unified database. So it's a single point of truth that various companies utilize. And in the same manner, the MLC database is available publicly, so for ingestion in other places. So really, at the end of the day, it's really we're trying to make life. So working with just one organization helps keep that information as up to date as possible, and the core being what is the CSAC HFA MLC database. And so that, I guess, that's one of the issues you mentioned is multiple registrations to the same source. You always want to go back and check. Once again, you want to make sure, you want to check if things got rejected in your registrations, because you need to resolve those, otherwise it's not moving forward. And then and knowing where your updates happen, so that you might find you've delivered something here this week and then delivered it someplace else in another week, and as a result, they're running into each other, going around the different ingestion timelines. Let's see. There's a question here, and I was sort of referring it to here about user-generated video, where the only existence of the quote sound recording for that, even though it's not there's no ISRC, is a YouTube or a TikTok video or something that's been distributed out there. There is separate manual, really, identification processes where those are the kind of things where there is metadata information that is in the notes that or the postings that whether the titles or the descriptions of the videos that are scoured and used to find for identification. There is also audio identification technology that scrapes these systems, that identify them, that have sort of melody matches, which pull into a queue we use to identify potential matches. Once again, it's a very manual process, and right, you want to identify things that are more that are of higher value. Videos that's not watched, that's in that state, isn't necessarily worth the time and effort to do that, when you could be spending time to identify something that makes dollars as opposed to pennies. So once again, one of the challenges is really, it's humans knowing what they're doing in these systems, working with identification processes to pull these things in. Okay, we are close to our hour here, so I want to make sure. I think I've covered everything else here. I guess one of the things I should point out is you could reach out to me at jrasso, JRASO @audium.com if you have questions, obviously, are interested in Audium's as a service. Right, and learning more about how we integrate with our other companies, and how, even if you're already an Audium client, and you will be hearing about this from me in New Year, about utilizing the other services to integrate with, since once again, making your data that you've already delivered to us and cleaned up with us used in other parts of the world, in sound recording distribution and video distribution. And additional services that we provide, including writer administration. So we're sort of an a la carte back office scenario, and we work with labels as well as music publishers. The majority is our expertise is really in music publishing, and sound recordings are more in the other companies we work with in our global YouTube administration. Okay, there we go. I'm happy to say, I think I've touched on most of these questions. I can't think of anything I missed. So we're in overtime, as they say. And, thank you. Thank you for your interest. I hope you're all still there. I can't see how many people are online right now, but
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to Audium for this very informative presentation. As he mentioned, please reach out to him with any other questions or to learn more about Audium. Make sure you stay up to date with what's going on with the Music Business Association by following us on all socials at Music Biz Assoc, and also checking us out at musicbiz.org for more information about Music Biz 2024, our Trust and Safety in Music Symposium, and other webinars. Hope you have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you so much.